So, good evening to all our participants. I welcome you all to the IEEE Virtual Talk series that are focused on photonics and optical technologies. So, I welcome you all here. So, today is the day one of this series. So, we have with us an eminent speaker, and I would like to formally welcome Sir and introduce him to all of you. We have with us Dr. Ramagopal V. Sarepaka. So if we look into his academics, then he has completed his PhD in optical system and design from IIT Delhi, MTech in applied optics and optical system design from IIT Delhi, and MSc physics and electronics from South Gujarat University, and he was the university topper there. If you look into the R&D career of Sir, so he has been retired as a chief scientist from CSIR CSIO in the year 2015. And if you look into his teaching profile, so he has been a professor at CSIR, CSIO Chandigarh. And the areas of interest of Sir includes precision optics, optical design, simulation and modeling, coding, ultra-high precision machining, single-point diamond turning, surface metrology and characterization, product development, instrumentation, and many other optical fields. So, and if we look into the industry career of Sir, so he has been the senior vice president at McVeck Industries Mumbai, and presently he is heading as senior vice president at Optics and Allied Engineering Private Limited, Bengaluru. And he has been guiding more than 15 PhD students, and he has more than 225 national and international journals. To serve for your talk. Yeah.
Mr. Ashish Kumar, kindly mute yourself.
Yeah. Ashish Kumar, kindly mute yourself. Yes, sir. Over to you now.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure addressing the students of CSIR, CSIO through this web seminar. And also, I thank the organizers of this series to give me an opportunity to share some details of my work, which I was lucky to do at CSIR, CSIO during my career there, and then afterwards with the precision optical industry in the country. So I think the first slide is there. Whosoever is operating, I think Mr. Rishabh will be operating this. So kindly see, we are in the slide 1. So the topic is aspheric optics, opportunities and challenges. As I've been talking about this, I worked with Optics and Allied Engineering Private Limited. We make precision optics. And after I joined this organization, we started making aspheric optics. Now, what is an aspheric optical system, and what are the positives, and what are the issues involved, and where it is useful, etc. Let's go one by one, and I hope you will be enjoying this discussion. Please free to ask me any questions that you have at the end, so that we can have a structured presentation and interaction. Thank you so much. So can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So we are now looking at the outline. The brief outline is, what is an optical? How do we develop the optical system, and what are the aspheric optics, and why we need to go for aspherics, and then where they are used, application areas, and the aspheric surfaces and spherical surfaces. What are the issues involved in application and the assembly and testing? And then some case studies. We did a lot of case studies during my tenure at CSIO in surface, broad categories. A plane surface, of course, it is also used as a filter. And then there are curved surfaces. In curved surfaces, again, there are two types, major types. One is a spherical surface. It could be a concave or a convex. If you go back to your high school level, or 6th class, 7th class, then you come across convex lenses, concave lenses, diverging lenses, or converging lenses. Similarly, mirrors also. That is one very popular shape, a spherical surface, where the radius of curvature of that surface is constant throughout its aperture. The category which I am going to talk about, or now the world is popularly using, is called aspheric. So why this aspheric? What is the interest there, and what is the necessity? 98% of the surfaces, as you can see from the slide, generally use spherical surfaces. Most of the optical systems, they meet the requirements by using a simple surface, a spherical surface. when I say simple performance requirements. But as the systems grow in terms of specific requirements and also nearly theoretical performances, and also whenever there is a constraint in the budget, volume budget or the weight budget or the footprint budget, where you want the system to be very compact. I give you a simple example. The mobile cameras that we are now talking about, the lens that the mobile camera has, hardly a 4 mm lens. The diameter of the lens is hardly 4 mm. Earlier, a camera system, if you remember, the kind of resolution and the performance that we are now getting from a mobile camera, earlier, maybe 20, 30 years back, we used to get the similar performance only with a 15 component system about weight of nearly say 4 kilos or 3.5 kilos. Right now, the mobile camera lens which we are talking is hardly 4 millimeter diameter and hardly 2 grams or 2.5 grams. So what I'm saying is when there is a constraint on your weight, constraint on your volume, and also the area that footprint, then you have to go for aspherics. So the solution for the advanced systems, advanced optical systems is you need to go for aspheric based systems. Can we go to the next slide? Slide number 5. So we were talking about the new systems or the advanced optical systems where we need to go for the system need to be compact, and have less weight, and also it should occupy less footprint and give better performance, or under different conditions, difficult conditions. Then we mentioned that we need to go for non-spherical surface, which is aspheric surface based optical systems. Now, what is an aspheric system? Aspheric surface. The answer is very simple. Any surface which is not spherical is an aspheric. That's a simple answer. Now, I already mentioned what is a spherical surface. Spherical surface is one surface where the radius of curvature of that surface is same whichever point that you pick up on the aperture. When I say aspheric, that means the surface is not spherical. So what it could be? Well, let us explore. Go to the next slide, please. Suresh. Yeah, there are, when I say non-spherical surface, it could be any shape, it could have any shape, but for the sake of understanding and for the sake of simplicity, it's like, you cannot go to the top step of a ladder straight away. You start from the first step. So similarly, we start from rotationally symmetric surfaces, which is generally, if you remember your 9th class, 10th class, 11th class, we studied conics, parabola, hyperbola, ellipse, etc. So I'm referring to them. They are rotationally symmetric. The first class of aspheric surfaces are called, rotationally symmetric conics. In this particular presentation, we will be talking about them only. Maybe at a future date, we will talk about the advanced surfaces also. So a conic, if you remember your equations, Sham series, etc., whatever you studied, or maybe your 2D geometry or 3D geometry, I'm sure most of you have forgotten. I myself have forgotten a long time back. Anyway, a non-spherical surface which is rotationally symmetric about an axis. The about an axis is the key word here, my friends. So that point on which the axis intersects the surface is, we call it the vertex. So the vertex is very important point on which the reference point for the surface. Now, how it is represented. The aperture I mentioned when I say the diameter of the surface, we call as aperture. And the vertex which I mentioned, where the optical axis intersects the surface, is called the vertex. Now, if the surface is a concave surface or a convex surface, depending on that, there is a depth between the aperture and that. I'll come to that as we see the slides. You will see that. Now, the sag in this equation, there is called Z is the sag, which is represented as CH square divided by 1 minus 1 plus K C square H square and higher order terms, where the K is the conic constant, C corresponds to the base curvature, the radius of curvature of the surface at that point, at the base point. When I say A1, A2, A3 are the higher order coefficients, H corresponds to the semi-aperture, and now K is 0 for a sphere. There is no asphericity. When I talk about spherical surfaces, non-spherical surfaces, it's, the values are given like this. -1 correspond to a parabolic surface, and less than -1 correspond to a hyperbolic surface. And there are two types of ellipsoids, one on the minor axis, another on the major axis. For a minor axis rotation, k is higher than 0, is positive value, and if it is rotating on the major axis, then it is between -1 to 0. So this is a simple fundamental equation of any conic which is rotationally symmetric. The whole work of aspheric surface is based on this. When I say whole work, means whether you are designing the surface, or fabricating the surface, or doing the characterization of the surface. This particular equation is something, like a password, right? Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, why do we need an ASPM? First question. Couple of slides back, I mentioned that the system performance needs to be near theoretical. When I say near theoretical, that means there should be no light loss, no energy loss. Optics people or physics people, if you remember your optics of your BSc or your maybe 9th class, 10th class, etc., 12th class, we used a term called aberration. Aberration is nothing but a defect. A defect where the light that is incident on the surface, and when it comes out of the surface, whether it is refracted through the media or reflected out of the surface, whichever way it is, it undergoes an aberration. It undergoes a transformation where some loss of the light, some loss of the energy is observed. Why it is happening? Why it is happening? The reason is pretty simple. The basic nature of the curvature of the surface causes this. When I say curvature, means different lens apertures focus the light at a different, not at a single point, but the focus will be at different points, which you can see very easily. I'm sorry, I'm away from you and I don't have a pointer by which, but if you can look at the optical axis and there is a junction of 5-6 lines crossing over. So this, instead of focusing at one point, there is a sweeping of 5-6 points. In other words, the intensity is distributed over a limited area, no doubt, but not at a single point. This distribution of intensity causes a loss of energy. This is something which we have to minimize. We cannot eliminate it completely. It cannot be the distribution cannot be zero. We have to minimize this. So to minimize this, what we need to do? We have to play with the shape of the surface. That playing of the shape right from a spherical surface to a non-spherical surface is the name of the whole game that we are going to play in the next few minutes. Okay, go to the next surface, please. Next slide, I'm sorry. Okay. Now, why aspheric? I'm just repeating the same thing, but to make you, I want to kind of brainwash you into this particular this particular system. Each curved surface and refractive index, they contribute to these aberrations, defects of the light. Now, how to get rid of that is you play with the refractive index of the media, and also if you can play with the shape of the surface, then you can control the aberrations. That's what we are going to do. People who are working in fiber optics, they know when I say graded index. Differential refractive index is called graded index, or GRIN, GRIN, GRIN. Some people are working in that. I could never get an opportunity to work that, so I prefer to work in the reshaping of the optical surface, which is what I am now trying to say or explain. So this reshaping is called spherical to aspheric. So now, why suddenly this kind of reshaping has taken place, which never happened? If you just look at the history of optics, the first recorded document has come in, I think, the 10th century. From then today we are in the 21st century. All these 11 centuries, people did not talk about aspherics. Suddenly, why we are now talking about aspherics? No, we are not suddenly talking. For the last 50-60 years, people have been looking for, like in a film, all those downtrodden people look for a hero, wait for a hero to come and rescue them. So similarly, all these optical designers, all the users of optical systems were looking somebody to give a surface, give a system which will free them of all these so-called aberrations or defects. Now, what prompted this resurgence or prompted the emergence of the aspheric surfaces? Number one, computer memories have become very cheap. Very cheap. So you can actually do a lot of computations in a very small amount of time, as well as with minimal expenditure. That is one thing. Secondly, the speeds are also increased. Fast computation. The third one is this sentence is nascent science of computer intelligence. When I say nascent science, still the computers are not able to think with the accuracy or with the precision. The speed is good, but with the manipulating nature of a human mind. So that is where human mind always dominates the computer or the artificial intelligence. So intelligence is coming into play. And then the new designs, new novel structures are coming into play. And the softwares, how a software speaks with another software, how the interfaces are being written properly. All these things are, the advantages are these vehicles on which the new surfaces, novel surfaces are coming up. More than that, let me put one more thing. Like, COVID has come and our lifestyle has changed. The way that we are looking at the life, the workplace, everything has changed. Similarly, in the last 300 years, last 100 years, World War I, World War II, and other wars, and the unrest in the country, different countries, and the different conditions and space exploration, all these things have asked for better performance of an optical system. And you say better performance. Yesterday you said it better, today it becomes a normal. And today's better will become tomorrow's normal. So demands have increased. So this is how, these are all the catalysts. When I say catalyst, the thing which prompted a faster development. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. When I say advantages, what are the advantages? Number one, the designer gets some additional degrees of freedom. When I say what are the degrees of freedom? Earlier, he had only few parameters. Radius of curvature, he could play with the radius of curvature. A concave shape or a convex shape, and what is the radius? Whether you want to go for a deep curvature or a shallow curvature or a flat surface, he had not much options except the diameter of the lens, which tells you how much field he can cover and how much light he can gather. If it is a telescope, he wants a larger diameter so that the light coming from the very far star, let us say maybe a few light years away, he would be able to capture that light intensity. So he wanted a bigger diameter. Similarly, whether the surface has to be deep or a shallow, that's just two parameters he had. And for a lens, when you are talking of a lens, third parameter is the refractive index. By playing with the refractive index, you can actually bend the rays. If you remember your class 6th or 5th, refractive index is nothing but the ratio of light within vacuum as well as the ether, in fact, and the media. So when the light passes through the media, it bends. The bending can be controlled by picking up a different refractive index. So here, only three parameters. Now, by reshaping the surface, you have some additional degrees. That is the biggest advantage. So, as I'm mentioning, the light gathering power has increased. Light sources, instead of having a high light source, very expensive and very high energy consuming light source, now you can go for a less expensive as well as a low power consuming. Image quality has certainly improved. Aperture has also increased. And now comes the practical aspects. Earlier I mentioned about a mobile camera lens. You don't need to lug a big, heavy, bulky system. Small cameras have come, giving the same performance or maybe better performance. And last point is your weights are being under control, the volumes are under control, carrying the systems have become easy, manipulating the system performances have become better. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is what's happening by using a non-spherical surface. When I say non-spherical surface, again, a reshaped surface, which giving extra degrees of freedom to the designer. So which if the fabricator can develop the same surface with minimal variation between what the design sheet says and the actual measurement says, then that means the prescription is the integrity of the prescription is maintained and the surface should perform as it is intended to. Now, where it is going to perform and what are the places, what are the application domains where the aspheric surfaces are going to be used. So can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Couple of photographs, they just tell you diamond turning equipment. Now, from aspherics, why did I go to diamond turning equipment? If you bear with me for just few minutes, I'll come to that. But let me say, people in the audience, whosoever is a mechanical engineer, Sorry? Sorry? Okay, let's continue. Okay, people who have worked in the mechanical engineering domain are, still students of that particular domain. They will understand this better. But anyway, let me bring this to the. When I say you got a design sheet and using a design spheric surface, how to make that surface, how to fabricate that surface. For that, we are going to talk a lot about the diamond turning. I'll come to that within few slides. So bear with me for these two. And this photograph is taken by one of my colleagues here at Optica. And this here you can see an actual diamond turning going on. Maybe one slide. Next slide. Can you just go flip over next two slides, please? Go to next one. Next one. Yeah, good. These are the application areas. Now, I'm not giving you systems here. I'm giving you the areas or domains. Avionics, remote sensing, space instrumentation, cell technology, nuclear instrumentation, precision automobile model, display systems, medical instrumentation. When I say medical instrumentation, again, I'll maybe show one or photograph also at a later stage. Surgical implants, mostly. And assistive devices. When I say assistive device, people who have this physically, challenged. For them, we at CSIO during my tenure there, we developed a lot of optics for the visually challenged persons. And the medical electronics division, the medical instrumentation division in the CSIO is working on the orthopedic and other gate-based things. So then, power instrumentation, energy devices, entertainment industry, all these practically wherever you want an optical system to work, you can put a aspheric surface and replace a whole lot many spherical surfaces. So these are the domains. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Here I'm talking of actual systems like, nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion, what is the simple principle? I don't need to say. You have to focus a very high energy beam at a very small area to cause the fusion. So how you increase the energy of the laser beam, how you focus, that's where the spheric surfaces come into play. And I remember at CSIO between 2004 to 8, my colleagues have developed and we have worked with some systems for nuclear fusion with the Department of Atomic Energy. And then there are, if you just go through the list, afocal telescope, IR objectives, when I say IR objectives, infrared systems. Infrared systems mostly are made for strategic applications for our armed forces. And then head-up display system. I'm sure if anybody working in optics division V3 of CSIO now, they must be knowing about the work that is being done by Dr. Vinod Karar and the team of my colleagues there. So, and virtual reality system, night vision goggles. Yes, night vision goggles is one other area where practically, see, Indian Army is maybe the third largest army in the world. So we need a big number of night vision systems. Helmet mounted or hand carryable, portable, low weight IR systems for our armed forces. Look at the market I'm talking about. And then consumer optics. When I say consumer optics, I'm talking of cameras. I'm talking of mobile phones. I'm talking of film cameras, still cameras, all those things. And then X-ray optics. And then, fiber optic communication. And then you look at the transport industry, automobiles. People need, head-up display systems, even for cars. Some 28 years back, the head-up display systems have come in cars and medical optics. There is a huge number of areas where you can use. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, this is, the next 3-4 slides, Rishabh, I think you can go a little faster. This is a head-up display system, maybe very preliminary system developed by CSIO. This was developed in 2002 or 3, I think. Can you go to the next one? Yeah, this is again, where I mentioned why do we need an aspheric? So that's it. Though now what you are seeing is the symbology. Is actually your office building, CSIO office building. The photograph is taken from the director's floor. Yeah, I remember this is taken into somewhere in 2003 or 2. I don't exactly remember. Maybe Dr. Vinod Group should be able to tell this. Maybe you can interact him. Okay, now this what we are seeing is helmet mounted display systems. I think CSO has started working on them. One more, can you go faster? Better, more forward. Yeah, good. One more, binocular HMD. Yeah, now can you stop for a minute? Yeah, good. This I just wanted to, want your observation here. See how many lenses are there. Look at the way the rays are being bent. This is for the HMD, helmet mounted display system. Look at the off-axial configurations. They are not straight lines. In order to bend the rays, in order to make sure that the energy is not lost during the transit, so many complicated things. Some can be replaced by using a aspheric. So that makes it lighter as well as easily compact, etc. So that's a simple example. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Yeah. I want to speak a little bit about here. What is that you are saying? No. Yeah, please stop here. This is the world's best aspheric surface in the whole world. What is this? We are looking at human eye. If you see that, if you see carefully, you are looking at the retina on your right side, and you see your cornea on the extreme left side, and in between, you see a lens held by ciliary muscles. This lens, my dear friends, is the one which has both the properties I mentioned about how to manipulate the aberrations. Two ways. One is play with the shape. Second one is play with the refractive index. Whosoever has created, you call him a creator or you call him God, he has designed, developed, fabricated, assembled this aspheric lens in human eye. This lens is both a graded index media and also the surface is aspheric. And the asphericity is dynamic. As you zoom into a nearby object or zoom out of a far object, the shape of the surface changes. By changing the shape, I mentioned earlier, your aberrations are controlled as well as the power of the lens also changes. When you change the power, the focus is also better for a far object or a nearby object. So here at the right side, if you see, there is a retina. Retina is curved. If any student of optics is still there, field curvature is one of the 5 aberrations that we studied. I mean, just let me refresh your memory. Spherical aberration, coma, astigmatism, field curvature, distortion. These are the monochromatic aberrations we studied in our class 9th or 10th, I don't remember. And then chromatic aberrations based on the differential dispersive nature of light. So having a curved image plane on which is retina, the field curvature aspect is taken care of. This is the ingenuity of the designer of our eye, human eye. So this is the best optical system in the whole universe. Can we go forward? Yeah, I mentioned some time earlier that we will be using aspheric surfaces in medical electronics, medical instrumentation also. Here you don't see any aspheric surface. What you are really seeing is there are 2 photographs here. On the left side, you see an implant. Right side is also an implant. The left side, you see a fine finish, a shining surface. What is that we really did here? See, when you put this implant in the body of a human being, and he is using it as a joint. Primarily, these are all joints. Okay, these joints rub with each other. If they do not have the desired smoothness, or if their roughness is not adequately controlled, then we will be into big trouble. The patient suffers with pain. So it is necessary to make sure that the roughness is reduced. Now, how come I'm talking optics at one side, now I'm talking about reduction of the roughness on a medical implant? The logic is very simple. If you remember a couple of slides back, I have shown you diamond turning. Why I shown diamond turning? How to fabricate an aspheric surface. We are going to talk about that in the coming slides. So that there you will appreciate this better. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Yeah. How an aspheric surface is developed? Can we go to the next one? Okay. Next one. Yeah. Now I mentioned earlier, first portion is design. You design first. And from the design, you go to the next stages. Okay, I already mentioned there are a few advantages. Okay. Now, how do you decide out of an optical system? Let's say there are 20 surfaces, 20 or 10 lenses. How much you want to aspherize? Which particular surface has to be aspherized? And where you want to do this, how to choose that. That's where the ingenuity or the wisdom or the experience of the designer, optical designer, comes into play. And how many of spheric surfaces, which particular surface, and how much aspherization on a given surface, and how much aberration control is needed. And then you have to play with your tolerances, your fabrication, how do you align them, how do you test them, and what are the facilities that you have at your disposal. Depending on your resources, it is like, how much money you have in your wallet or in your credit card. Depending on that, you spend also. Similarly, what are the facilities that you have that would help you to decide the amount of aspherization that a optical system can get. So this is, primarily a policy making area, policy making stage. How many, how much, and where, etc. Okay. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. Once you have decided on aspherization, amount of aspherization you are going to introduce. Now, how to do that? When I say aspherization, means you are reshaping the optical surface. How do you do that? That means you are reshaping, means you are taking some material removal is taking place. Typical optical workshop, if you ever visit optical workshop in CSIR, you must have seen grinding and polishing going on. That is one thing. And how do you reshape it? Whether you use an abrasive grinding, which I mentioned, and one other way is that vacuum aspherization. Okay, you remove the material or you deposit the material, additive manufacturing, or ion machining, ion deposition, both removal of material as well as deposition. And then you deform the surface also. And then there is a compressive molding. There are many methods. And I'm not talking about, I did not pick up the word diamond turning. This diamond turning is what we are really going to talk in the next 10-15 minutes. What is diamond turning? Can we go to the next one, please? Yeah. What is diamond turning? Before that, how a optical surface is made? Optical surface is made. Can we go to the next slide? No, okay. Can we go to the next slide so that I can come back? Yeah. Number 28. Yeah, good. How an optical surface, in a conventional method, how it is made. You take a glass blank. Let's talk of a lens now. You take a glass blank. You rough shape it. Okay. By using a tool or whatever it is. And you leave, the stock is a 1 millimeter extra or maybe 0.5 depending on the skills of your workshop people. And then you generate the optical shape. When I say shape, the radius of curvature or the shape that your lens is going to, positive or negative, or convex or concave, and whatever the thickness, etc. Within 0.1, you generate that curvature, and then go for a polishing. Rough grinding is over, so you go for fine grinding. Fine grinding, they use small abrasive, mostly diamond grit powder, or maybe there are other materials. If you maybe some other time we can spend more time on optical surface fabrication, or maybe if you are students of this ACI SIR, maybe some classes must have been held there. I understand, some of my colleagues from B3 must be taking those classes. I used to teach this earlier when I was there. Anyway, you need to remove the material in a very controlled way. How to take that? That's the trick. And how much material you leave behind. And then finally, once you remove the material, you have to ensure that there is no subsurface damage. And whatever subsurface damage is there, you have to remove that subsurface damage also by polishing the surface, because the ground surface is not transparent, transparent in the normal sense. It is kind of opaque, translucent. So to make it transparent, to make it smooth, two things happen when you are polishing it. One is it becomes smooth. Secondly, the subsurface damage is removed, and finally the lens becomes transparent suddenly. That's one of the miracles that I have seen in an optical workshop. And then it transmits light. Okay, whatever is incident on that. So this, and then the diameter is controlled, which we call as lens edging. So this we do in order to make sure that all the lenses are assembled properly without any axiality errors. So can we go one slide backward now to 27? Yeah. So whatever we talked in the last slide, that is slide number 28, are I was talking about who is doing all this. A person is doing or a machine is doing, whosoever is. Primarily, I'm talking of the process. Now, how to ensure that the process is error-free? That is where CCOM, that is computer controlled optical manufacturing technology, comes into play. You control the grinding, you control the polishing, and you built in a feedback mechanism so that your curvature is maintained, the aperture is maintained, and the surface quality is also maintained. How do you do that? Now, the basic problem in aspheric surface generation is the difference between aspheric and spherical surface. If you remember, here the radius of curvature is continuously changing from the vertex, point by point, all the way up to the edge of the surface. That means you have to create a surface where the radius is constantly changing. How can you depend on a human skill here? That is first question. Secondly, is there any mechanism to develop this kind of surface where the radius is continuously changed? No tools are available. The normal traditional tools are all spherical tools. So traditional optical workshop techniques do not serve the purpose here. So you have to go to some other methodology of material removal where the surface is removed, the material is removed as per the prescription given by this equation. If you remember that equation which we have given, Z is equal to CH square divided by 1 plus 1 minus under root, K square, etc. All those higher order terms a few minutes back. That is the equation, that is the prescription for an aspheric, that is a rotationally symmetric conic. That particular surface to make, if you have a mechanism by which this equation is fed into a machine and with proper controls, with ultra high precision, well, there are many ways of doing it. But the best way to do is go to a mechanical workshop, use a lathe machine, a normal simple lathe machine, put some intelligence into it, put some programming skills into that, and make it the controllers very accurate. And then what you get from a normal lathe machine to you go into a CNC machine and go for a advanced version of a CNC machine. There use a proper tool and a very highly controlled, controller accuracy is there. You control the temperatures and all everything around the machining conditions you control. Then what is the prescription? Where are you landing? You are actually talking of a ultra high precision material removal system. Okay, that is the panacea which delivers you a surface which is whatever earlier we talked about in terms of optical quality as well as asphericity. Now, that's where if you go to the fourth paragraph in this aspheric profile equation, it is fed to the spindles of computer controlled curve generators. So what I'm talking is an ultra high precision optical surface generating equipment. That's where diamond turning comes into play. Can we go to the 29th slide? Yes. 28, yeah. So we are talking of actually a diamond turning machine. Now, what is a diamond turning machine? Diamond turning machine is a perfect machine tool job or workpiece combination. And I say perfect. The machine has very ultra high precision controller accuracy. The tool, we use a diamond tool, so that's the reason why we call it a diamond turning. The tool is practically a diamond tip. And then the workpiece is what your optical surface that we are going to generate. When these three work in unison, and when you control the process, and when you control the operational conditions as well as the machining conditions with the proper feedback mechanism, you generate the optical surface, the surface of the highest quality. Somebody asked me a long time back when I was at the CSIO, you are using a CNC lathe machine and you say that this is an optical instrument. How is that possible? The answer is very simple, my friends. I'm using a ultra high precision mechanical equipment to generate an optical quality surface. When I say optical quality, the surface waviness for a person who has fundamental knowledge of waviness, mechanical engineering domain people, they can understand. For physics people, it we call as figure error. In optics, we measure everything in terms of the wavelength. When I say wavelength, it is 0.4 to 0.7 is our visible wavelength. So when I say wavelength, the fraction of a wavelength is my error. We'll come to that a little later. Okay. Now, this single point diamond turning, when I say single point, practically the point, there is nothing like a single point theoretically. The very small contact area between the tool and the job is held on the lathe or the diamond turning machine, not by a 3-jaw chuck or a 4-jaw chuck that you see on a normal mechanical workshop. Here we hold the job by vacuum. So there is no stress on the job. It's something like, when you hold a baby, 1 month old baby, or maybe a few days old baby, you don't squeeze the baby. And at the same time, you don't hold the baby lightly. It may fall down. So similarly, when we hold the optical component for machining or material removal, you hold it tight enough to hold it properly and loose enough not to hurt it. That's the point. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, how do you do this? There are stages. You prepare the job with approximately 100 microns or 0.1 millimeter and then mount it on a vacuum chuck, I already mentioned. Then you properly select a tool. It's like, a painter selects a proper brush with the right geometry, with shape, or that one. So similarly, you select the tool with the right geometry, and how do you mount the tool, etc. And then TPG means tool path. You have to generate a tool path, a proper tool path. It's like, how you go from, let's say, in CSIO to sector 17 or maybe Elante Mall. You have a path. You have to chalk the path. If you are asking your machine to take you, then you have to give this path to your machine. Similarly, how the machine is going to generate this surface, you have to give this to how the tool is traveling on your job. That is called tool path generation. And then diamond turning takes place, the machining takes place. Then you take the metal component out, clean it up, verify. In other words, you check the surface for the prescription, whether the radius is okay or not, the radii are okay or not, whether the K number is properly done or not. And then the figure error is there, and how is the roughness, these things. So these are the stages. Can we go to the next one, please? We'll go a little faster from here. I'll not get into many details. So this is how we generate an aspheric surface. And here, diamond turning is primarily a displacement controlled process. So this force is distributed at a one point, whereas in grinding process, force is equally distributed over a large domain, large area. So there actually you will fracture a surface, the top layer of the surface, and then you apply pressure. You fracture the top layer, and that's how there is a network of cracks, and then repeated application of pressure force removes the material, the top layer. Here, line by line, you are actually like, walking, or, taking a pen on the paper, or like, taking a stylus on the surface. You are taking the tool, removing the material by using the shearing the material. So this is a force distribution over a simple area. And how do you do that? There are 3-4 parameters in our hand. One is the feed, another one is the speed, that is the spindle speed, and the depth of cut. So last point we have forgotten to add, which is the material. The motion of the tool depends on the material on which it is actually working. Simple example, if I ask you to walk on a highway, or I want you to walk on a cobbled street, or on a place where there is no road, your path is disturbed. Your way of walking will be disturbed. Similarly, the tool's geometry as well as the material which is being machined or processed would decide the surface quality that comes at the end. Next slide, please. Yeah, we mentioned about grinding process, the network of fractures, etc. I think we can skip this and we can go to the next one, please. Sorry. Okay. Now I was mentioning about how do we test the surface, whether it is meeting the required specifications or not. What we do is actually we measure the inaccuracy. We don't measure the accuracy, we measure the inaccuracy. In normal conventional optical fabrication, you use a test plate, you use Newton rings, and and then an interferometer, etc. And for the roughness, you have the concept of how many scratches are there, what is the depth and what is the width of that scratch and dig concept. Whereas in diamond turning, the profile accuracy is actually measured, or inaccuracy is measured by using a profilometer, a scanner which goes over the surface, scans the surface, and it actually measures the depth of the surface, or we call it as a sag or size, and it measures the waviness of the surface. And then surface finish is also done by the same scan only. You have to write the program. If you remember that equation which I was talking about, the same equation is used by your designer to design the surface. We feed the same equation to the fabricator or the diamond turning person through his CNC programming to generate the surface. And here also, we use the same equation to test the surface, whether it is made as desired or not. Okay, next one, please. Okay, yeah, 30. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry. Okay. Which one we are talking? 35. Okay. Wrong. There are, as I mentioned, there are many methods of generating this kind of surface. Why diamond turning is selected? Because diamond turning has the most preferred method. Because the lathe machine or the CNC machine or the machining is one issue. It has to be ultra high precision. As I mentioned, we are talking of controller accuracy of few nanometers, 8 to 9 nanometers, and we are talking of a tool which is hard at the same time very sharp with minimal tool wear. These issues are very important. If the tool wear is high, it's like you have a chalk piece which during writing on the board, let us say it erodes, it wears off. Before you finish a sentence, you have to change your chalk. I'm talking of old days. Okay. So similarly, you have to be very sure of the wear of the tool that you are using. So that's the reason why diamond has been selected, because diamond is the hardest material that is available to mankind. So diamond has been selected as a tool. An ultra high precision lathe is selected for machining. So that's the reason, instead of normal CNC machines or any other material removal methods, diamond turning is selected to generate a surface which is aspheric of optical quality. When I say optical quality, the waviness or the peak to valley errors are a fraction of optical wavelength. And optical wavelength, mind you, we are talking of 0.4 micron to 0.7 micron is the visible range. So that is the reason why we go for diamond turning. Can we go to the next one? Yeah, I was mentioning about machining conditions. Needless to say, the machine has to be stable. No vibrations, no shocks, also no thermal shocks. Why we should not have thermal shocks is the machine is, most of the machine is metal, okay? Coefficient of linear expansion of any metal varies between 7 micron to 14 micron per meter per degree centigrade. And the machine, generally the bed is about 250 mm. 250 mm, that is 1/4 of a meter. So, if there is a 1 degree centigrade change in the radius, in the temperature around the system, then you are actually causing, say, 1.75 microns to 3.5 microns error in the movement of the metal slide. Just think about it. The movement is itself, error. There is an error by, let us say, 1.75 micron. Then what will happen to the surface that is being processed? Because I was mentioning about 0.4, 0.7 is my wavelength, and the surface quality needs to be a fraction of wavelength. That is, we are talking about, let's say, 0.15 micron. How can I afford to have a thermal effect to thermal conditions to affect my surface? So that's the reason why we say the temperature has to be, ambient temperature has to be maintained within plus or minus. Relative humidity is also controlled. Cleanliness is also should be high, and the machine has to be really good. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. Yeah. Now, what you are looking at? No, the previous. You got 2 slides ahead. Last one. Just 1 slide back. Yeah. What you see here is primarily a diamond tool. What you see is a shank, molybdenum shank it is, and with a diamond tip at the edge. This is a very, this photograph we have taken from the site of the tool supplier. Can we go to the next one, please? Next one. Yeah. Here you are actually looking at the geometry of the tool. See, when you go and buy a diamond for your sister or your mother or your fiancé, whosoever, you worry about color cut clarity, and the carat, that is the weight, and the 4th one is cost. Those are the 5 parameters you worry about when you go into a jeweler store. when optics people go and buy a diamond tool, there are about 14 parameters. All these waviness control, rake angle. If you're a mechanical engineer, I will be very happy to share with you later. But this is a general audience, so I don't get into the details. But all these 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 parameters are very, very important to decide the geometry of the tool, whether it is suitable to a given job or not. And here, waviness is most important. Waviness, when I'm saying, waviness means the edge of the tool should be properly spherical or properly circular. There will never be a proper ideally circular thing. There will be some violations of the circularity. Those violations of the circularity is called waviness of the tool. The waviness of the tool, generally an uncontrolled waviness is called a 2 micron. And we go for even 0.1 micron tools also I have used in my career. Rake angle 0 for normal ductile materials, minus rake angle minus 25, 35 go for ceramics or crystals. Tool nose radius is again very important parameter where which particular profile you want to generate. The type of profile would decide which radius should be used. So the radius of the tool should be used. Okay, so can we go forward? Right. Now we are talking of surface quality. The surface which is obtained after the diamond turning. There are 3 basic parameters, my friend. One is form. I'm talking of the shape. You want a spherical surface, you got an aspherical surface. You want a parabolic surface, instead of parabolic, let's say you got a hyperbolic surface. Or you want an ellipsoid on the minor axis, instead of that you got an ellipsoid on a major axis. These are violations. Or maybe you wanted a spherical surface, let us say. With, let us say, 200 millimeter radius. So instead of 200, the tolerance is, let us say, 1 millimeter. Instead of 199 to 201, you got, let's say, 210. Boss, this is not acceptable. In other words, you have violated the form. So that's a form error. First parameter we always check is whether the form is okay or not. That means the shape is okay or not. You wanted to create a dog, instead of that you created an elephant. That is a shape error. Then comes the figure error. Figure is, okay, the shape is okay, boss. But there are some peaks and valleys. Let us say you want to create a cat, you created a tiger. Shape is right, size is wrong. So the radius was okay, but there are peaks and valleys. Figure is exactly refers to the human form like that only in even an optical surface. You have to have a minimum figure error. So general figure error that we are, in CSIO, in a research atmosphere, the figure errors are okay. What we used to generally do is, lambda by 4. Lambda happens to be 0.6328 micron. Lambda by 4 means 0.15 microns. But routinely in the industry, in the last 5 years that I've been working, we are generating lambda by 5, lambda by 6. That means nearly 0.1 micron, 0.10 micron. Okay. Only yesterday, I just measured some components for one of our clients. I can't divulge the name of the client's confidentiality issue, but the components we made 15 nanometer peak to valley error. Forget microns, we are talking of nanometers now. That's the kind of surface quality they want. Okay. Now, third one is finish. When I say finish, I'm talking of lack of roughness or smoothness, which is either rough or smooth. You have to quantify. How do you quantify? I will give you a simple way that you can understand. A new spectacle lens that you buy from an optometrist, the roughness is around 90 nanometers. And routinely in the workshop and in my shop floor, both at CSIO when I was working there as well as in the industry now, routinely we make surfaces of better than 5 nanometers. When I say 5 nanometers, better means less than 5 nanometers of roughness. That means 18 times better than a newly minted optical spectacle lens. Just imagine. Now, if you remember that photograph that I shown, of a joint implant, that's where this roughness plays a major role. Okay, you need a better finished surface for smooth operation as well as better reflection and better transmission. Can we go to the next one, please? Yeah, here, what you see, those 3 lines, the dark line is actually the intended surface or the target surface. And the other 2 lines are what you got. One is a shape error, the other one is a figure error. And if you see the small spikes on these yellow color spikes, they refer to the roughness. The reasons of all the three, form error and the waviness error or figure error we call, or the roughness are given below. We don't need to go into that. No, these are the ideal conditions. No, so far I have talked. Now, let's talk. What are the problems in developing in an spheric surface using a diamond turning? There are many issues. We'll go one by one. We'll take within 10-15 minutes. We are going to stop this. Another 5-10 minutes rather. So we know that aesthetic fabrication using diamond turning is a vibration-free diamond tool machining. Material removal is minimal, consistent surface quality, surface characterization is, all these things are welcome. They look pretty good when you hear these things, but in reality, what will happen? Go to the next one. I think we are still in. Okay, we need to go to next. Yeah. Sorry, I should have asked you. Yeah, stop. What are the errors? Ramraj to nahi chalega. Somewhere we come across issues. Now, these are the issues. What happens? The tool wear is very high, or the tool waviness. I mentioned to you, the tool circularity is not ideal. There is some violations of the circularity that we call as tool waviness. And the sizing, tool zyada ghis gaya hai. There is offset. The tool is not set at the proper place. It's better with the offset. And then there is a depressions coming into play while holding the job. And distortion, so somewhere the cooling is very high, somewhere the cooling is less. The thermal effects also come into play. Because of the non-uniform thermal effects on the surface, you have uneven swelling of the surface. And then because we are removing the material line by line, there are actually steps. And then the machine is in perpetual motion. I mean, not the machine is in motion, the spindle is in perpetual motion, 3,000 or 4,000 revolutions per minute. So there are some dynamic effects also taking place. Maybe loading is not okay, or the machine job is not properly put, or the balance of the machine is not okay, or maybe there is some resonance coming in the machine. All these things will contribute to the errors in terms of form, figure, and finish. That's what we have to worry about. Next one, please. Yeah. What will happen when these things happen? All those things that I mentioned, tool aapka ghis gaya hai. It's the dynamic machining is not causing some issues. Thermal effects are also causing issues. What will happen? Let's see. Next one, please. Next one. Yeah. Then this happened, tolerances are violated. The surface figure and roughness tolerance are violated. So when one particular surface becomes nut-cut ho jata hai, when it violates this prescription, it contributes to the the errors will contribute to the overall performance. Something like this. Let's say you are a class of 10 students in class 10. One fellow has failed, the overall percentage has come down. Everybody is scoring 90, 95, but this chap is like me, scoring only 42, 43. Just because of this joker, the whole percentage comes down. Similarly, one surface, because of its errors during fabrication, will spoil the performance of the whole optical system. So they will contribute when the design goals are failed. Just imagine a soldier using your night vision system. His life is dependent on the fabrication and the design that is being when he is carrying. One surface is not made properly. Instead of shooting an enemy, he may shoot our own soldier. So these things will happen. If the system is used in cancer therapy, in radiation therapy, instead of burning a diseased tissue, the laser beam may burn a healthy tissue. So it is necessary that we make the surfaces exactly as per the prescription, as per the design data. For that, you have to make sure that this machining process is minimum of errors, and they should stick to the tolerances. Next one, please. How to resolve these issues? Very simple. You have to play with the parameters. See, the thing I want to share here with you people, I'm not an engineer. I was not trained to an engineer. I'm a science man. MSc Physics has My introduction was given. Then I did my MTech in optics, and then I went to PhD. That too in design, not in fabrication. But this fascinated me. This diamond turning has fascinated me when I went to USA, Indo-US Science and Technology Fellowship. There we have gone through this. We learned there. Now this flowchart that you are, this figure that you are seeing, how to resolve the errors. You start with the machine, prepare a component, measure the surface, whether it is okay or not. If it is not okay, then you change your tool path, the way by which you are walking. Your tool is moving, and then you go back. This error correction cycle takes place. Can we go to the next 2 slides? Next one. Yeah. Here at the bottom, you can see the figure error they encircled minus 2.7 micron, and there is another one, PT 4.09 before correction. Go to the next one, please. Next one. Yeah, here you can see the PT is reduced from 4 to 2 point something. This is how we do the correction. So how do we? Yeah, these are the now. If it is so simple, then what are the challenges? Let's just go through this little faster. Okay, I think I am overshooting the time. Okay, next one. Yeah, this is from this portion I'm talking of a deterministic precision machining. When I say deterministic, what is deterministic? Go to the next one, please. Yeah, deterministic system means randomness is minimized. So a deterministic model will always give you the same output from a given starting condition. It is like this: आप 3 sector से निकलेंगे, 17 sector जाना है. At 20 minutes it will take. You under normal conditions. So under the same conditions, you should always take only 20 minutes. If you take 25 minutes or you take 14 minutes, that means your processing of this data is not properly learned. The system is not deterministic. Deterministic means randomness is reduced. That's what we apply in this diamond turning. Can we go to the next one? And what are the parameters which create randomness? There are 4 parameters. One is material, second one is machining condition, and third one is machining and tooling parameters, and machining and metrology protocols. These are the sources of violations, or sources of not able to meet the end results. Can we go faster? Yeah, material. First thing is material. These are the parameters: hardness, ductility, brittleness, thermal property, whether it is a crystalline, amorphous, etc. will decide its behavior. Now, but material also is not decided by you, machinist, but by the designer. He decides, मुझे ये वाला material चाहिए for these reasons. It's a normal aluminum चाहिए, या super fine aluminum चाहिए, or copper चाहिए, or maybe he wanted a brass material. This is designed by him, not by you. Similarly, he wanted to go for a IR component. Should I use a germanium, or should I use a silicon, or should I use some other material? This is as per the prescription. It is something like this. You have a brother who is an intelligent fellow, and you have another brother like me who is a useless fellow. Now, question is, intelligent fellow will anyway score marks. Now, how do you make me a useless fellow to score more marks? That's where your skills come into play. Or you have to manage my intelligence in such a way that the targets are achieved. Next one, please. Machining conditions. How do you control? What are the parameters? The coolant is used. Whether the coolant is properly selected or not, properly placed or not, whether coolant is actually cooling the job or not, or it's cooling somewhere else. It should not be kahin pe nishana, kahin pe tikana. It should be exactly where it should be. Next one is temperature. The ambient temperature is fluctuating. So obviously, you remember I was talking of thermal coefficient of linear expansion. Those things should not come. Similarly, the chips are coming in during machining. The chips are properly thrown out or coming in between the tool and the job. And similarly, what is the humidity? And what about the tool wear? If the tool is worn out during the machining, obviously you don't get the surface quality as you want. Similarly, then last one, what is the type of programming? What is the way that the tool is moving? So this also causes. Next one, please. Yeah. Then machining parameters also. I mentioned there are 3 major parameters: tool feed rate, spindle speed, depth of cut, and then tool overhang. All these 4 parameters. Tool overhang is how the tool is being held, far or near. So these will, I think from here we'll go a little faster. The next parameter tells you tool feed. What happens when you properly or improperly select a tool? Okay, then next one. Here is, your placement of the job. You see the lines, whether it is properly done or tool overhang, etc. Okay, then next one. Yeah, these studies, my dear friends, we have done all these studies. Whatever you are seeing are done at CSI. So I owe all these slides to CSIO. All my colleagues there have done, particularly Mr. Vinod Mishra has done. So here you see the parameters: tool feed rate, depth of cut, spindle speed, and their effect on the surface quality in terms of roughness as well as in PT. RA corresponds to roughness, PT corresponds to the figure error. Next one, please. Here we are playing with different depths of cut. Next one, please. Yeah, it is highest depth of cut. What will happen in highest depth of cut? The surface quality becomes bad, poor. So then tool feed rate, how it is, affecting. We have done all these studies on different materials at CSIO. You can go to the next slides a little faster. Yes, the next one. You can actually see how, here. If the spindle speed is not properly selected, then we get something called a star picture. And then what you are seeing is the tool is not properly held. That is called tool overhang. If the tool is too closely held or too far away held, either way. Next one, you can see this, the tool overhang, the effect of tool overhang on the surface quality in terms of waviness, as well as next one. Yeah, this is the roughness, if it is properly held or not. So these studies we have conducted. Next one, here it is an improperly held tool. Very bad holding of the tool. It's something like, how do you hold your pen while you are writing? Is it you put the nib or that writing area very close to your fingers or very far? That is what I mean by saying overhang. Next one, please. Yeah, this is for the roughness. Tool overhang with the roughness. The next two slides. Next one, please. Yeah, this slide actually, what you see in this you may not be able to appreciate, but this work took us around nearly 3.5 months work. That is shown in this picture. In this thing, we are showing different roughnesses under different tool feed rates and different depths of cut and also different spindle speeds. Which one, and for a given tool overhang, which is the best one? How do you hold the tool? So this study was part of a couple of MTech students' thesis. So next one, please. So we have done this study for both roughness as well as for the waviness also. And then a couple of studies we did, whether a shallow surface as well as a steep surface. What happens in terms of roughness? Next slide, please. Yeah, these studies also we conducted. So next one, please. There are many studies we conducted there. Then we had done an exhaustive study on diamond tool wear. What would happen? We taken two materials, silicon and polymethyl methacrylate, that is acrylic normal size. Next one, please. Yeah, a typical tool, how it looks like. On the photograph on your right is a photograph taken by one of my students there at CSIO, and this is a octahedral structure is the diamond crystal. So, and if you remember, next one, please. Yeah, these are those parameters which I mentioned are very important for selection of a proper geometry of the tool. Rake angle, conical, nose radius, cutting arc, offset angle. Anybody is more interested more to know about this, and my name, my numbers are etc. Contact details are there. You are most welcome to contact me. I don't want to get into the details here because it's an exhaustive study we did here on the tool geometry effects, particularly tool wear. Next one, please. Yeah. If the edge, as I mentioned, it is supposed to be this circularity, ideal circularity if it ever happens. There is a violation, there is a transgression. So what would happen is controlled waviness and uncontrolled waviness, how the tools appear to be, this is what I'm showing here, the surface suffers. Next one. Yeah. And the tool shape, apart from that, if the tool is worn out more than what it should, what would happen? You see that, inlaid, that photograph style, the schematic tells you. Because practically the tool tip is replicating on the job. If the tool tip is not okay, the job will also be not okay. Next one. Yeah. tool life. This is a typical tool life picture we picked up from a mechanical engineering book, and we analyzed whether this is not going to happen. Rapid initial wear, uniform wear, and then the wear accelerates, and what is its effect on the surface quality. Next slide, please. Yeah. Why do you measure this metrology? Why do you measure the tool wear? Very important. Friends, the tools are very, very expensive. Normal CNC lathe tools may cost about 50 rupees to 150 rupees, or maybe at the most 1500 rupees maximum. Whereas the diamond tool starts from 20,000 rupees and goes all the way up to 1.4 lakhs. Just one tool. So when the tool gets worn out, I have to change the tool. When I change the tool, means more money. In other words, the component becomes very, very expensive. In order to control my tooling costs, I need to study the wear characteristics. So that's the reason why we have to do this. In diamond tool metrology, before CSI has attempted this, nobody has done this. We have seen a lot of literature. The way that it was understood was different. We have done a very radically different way of doing things. So can you go to the next one? Yeah, you can see the classic photograph. On the left side you see unused diamond tool. On the far right side you see a worn-out diamond tool. See the great, very marked difference between these two. So, in order to quantize this, we have done a lot of studies. Can we go, Rishabh ji? Can we go a little faster now? 5 slides are coming up. Yeah, this slide tells me there is no wear at all. Waviness is hardly 3. Next one. Go just faster. We have done a typical machining cycles starting from 50, 100, 150, okay? And then different materials again. And each cycle is telling me how much the tool, you can see the photographs, how much that D-shaping of the tools. Yeah, stop please. We have done up to 270 cycles. This was a study again, a couple of MTech students for about 4 to 5 months, day in and day out, different materials. We have taken the pictures of the tool also. We have taken the design of experimental also, very critical. We did a lot of studies there. So what you see here is just the replication of a normal tool wear as is for the standard textbooks. Now, you can say, Saab aapne kya naya kiya hai? We have done all this with a diamond tool, which was never reported. So we got few publications based on this study also. So can we go a little faster now? Next. Yeah, this is again on a different wear we are talking. Yeah, next one. Yes, we have analyzed this in terms of the normal tools also. And then the next. Yeah. This is here. So here we are, talking of a different thing. If you remember, I've told you how to hold the job. If you hold the job tight or loose, what would happen? You actually are bending the job. You bend the job, whether the hysteresis curves, hysteresis properties will allow the job to come back to its original shape, it will spring back or not. If there is some error is left behind, if the error is left behind, that means you have damaged the component. So the holding of the job is very important. One of my student at CSIO has done some work on this particular aspect. And these 3-4 slides. Next one, please. Next 2 slides, you can go fast, Rishabh ji. Yeah, stop here. You see how the different materials are being bent during holding. The curve on the graphs on your right bottom corner are actually telling for different materials. So the profile deflection versus vacuum. This is a very interesting study. We never thought that would happen, but it is very helpful for us to understand how critical diamond turning can be. Next one. Yeah. We have done 4 of my students have done how the thermal effects of during diamond turning would affect the profile error in diamond turning. Spread over 3-4 years, boys have done this at CSIO and MTech students of them, and again these ASESIR students. We have designed a series of experiments and a mathematical model has been created, and then we did all that. So what I want to share with you is a lot of case studies have been conducted for different aspects of diamond turning using different materials. And I have to accept, I have to submit here, most of the work, my dear friends, was done by you people or your predecessors, the students. My participation was giving an idea, follow up, design of the experiment. Actual work, actual running the show was done by my students, your predecessors at CSR, CSI. So all credit to them. I mean, my contribution is only idea, assimilation, analysis, and conclusion. Whereas the actual कहते हैं ना जो घास काटने का काम वो सब बच्चों ने किया है. So this is what we did there. Now let me next one please. Yeah, here I'll just spend 2 minutes. Now after CSIR career, you people, after your degree that you take, where are you going to? You go to academics to teach, you go to industry, or you become scientists, or you go abroad, you do whatever you want. Whether you are going to work in the field of science and technology or you are going to become managers, I have no idea. Future will unveil everything at side. But when you look at what are the issues in diamond turning in an industry, this particular slide tells everything. We'll start from the last one. How cost effective is your process? If it is very expensive, customer is not interested. Management is not interested. So you always have to have this goal in your mind, how to minimize the cost. So that is the first one. And one thing above is opportunity utilization. See, COVID-19 is going to teach us many things. New business models are coming. New living styles are going to emerge. Now, opportunity, whatever opportunity you come your way, comes your way, grab with both hands. How fast, how quick, how effectively. Then all your resource management. It is one thing to have resources and another thing to manage them optimally. What is the manpower on operational level as well as the intellectual level? You can't have everybody doing everything, right? How you are going to deal with the people? People with intellect, they come with egos also, complexities of behavior. How you deal with? Because end of the day, how much money you made, how many projects you have completed, these are the issues will come into play. Nothing else matters. In an R&D atmosphere, how many papers you have written, how many patents you have taken, how many products you have developed. Right? In an industry, how many projects you have completed, how much billing you have done end of the month. Okay. Then raw materials. How good is our access to raw material sources, global sources or national sources? And what about their costs? I'll give you a simple example cost. Normal aluminium per kilo costs 380 rupees to 420 rupees or 450 rupees when it lands at your place. But space quality aluminium, I'm buying it from a source. It costs 14,500 rupees per kilo when it lands at my place. There is only just one source, a global source, which develops space quality aluminium. We made a lot of mirrors using that, and some of our mirrors have gone in Chandrayaan 2 and 1 as well. I'm very happy to be part of that work. That's another story, that Chandrayaan did not reach moon surface the way that we wanted it. That's another thing. But the mirrors have reached moon. Okay, so cost of the material is important. Similarly, tooling, I mentioned a few minutes back, tools are going to be very, very expensive. If you do not manage them properly, you end up with very high expenditure. And the infrastructure, what are the equipment that you have, how many testing equipment you have, how you are managing them. Buying is one thing, managing is another thing. Manpower kitna hai aapke paas? Are you taking AMCs properly or not? Consumables are properly there or not? Temperature conditions, cleanliness, all these things are taken. A precision lab costs a lot of money, my friends. And then financials and time. Most important is time. If you do not do the project in time, kya karna hai? It's something like you reach the railway station after the train has left it. So, chidiya chuk gayi kheta prasthai to kya? Be very careful about how you manage your time. This is something which is one resource which can never be replenished. Money you can earn, material you can buy, time you cannot earn back. So these are the issues in not only in industry, even in your stage of life, in CSIR, CSA. It's very, very important. So next one, couple of slides more when we are through. We need to develop micro machining models. All the work that I have presented based on fundamental principle to last conclusions. Some mathematics, some modeling, some gut feelings, some assumptions, some literature survey, like that. And tool ware dynamics, materials, subsurface damage. One of my students at CSA just completed his PhD, I think, Rohit Sharma. He done extensive work on subsurface damage. And the heat, we are talking about heat. This is a very big issue in diamond turning of a component, vibration analysis. So microfabrication and nano characterization, we have to do a lot of theoretical studies, which should help the practical aspects of this. So next one, please. So I can sum that, the future of aspheric optics in this country as well as abroad, the world, very, very exciting, very challenging, and amply rewarding. Amply rewarding. You get so much of satisfaction by making an aspheric surface, by following all those things that you explore life on your way. So friends, I think that brings to the, we are nearing the conclusion. Next one, please. So please allow me to thank everybody who contributed to the little bit of knowledge I was trying to share with you. My students primarily, all my students are actually my teachers. And then my colleagues who worked with me, I'm still working at CSIO and who retired. And then my teachers who taught me fundamentals of optics. And then all government agencies which have given a lot of money to play with. And then all organizations with whom I interacted, I benefited, and I frustrated, whatever it is. Vendors who have provided me the equipment, the tools, everything, and the clients who gave us the projects. Most importantly, the community, the optics community at CSIO as well as outside CSIO. So thank you all. Thank you for the wonderful time that everybody gave to me during this journey. So next one. Next one, please. Yeah, this is a textbook that I could write in collaboration with two of my very good friends. One, Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, he's from Precision Engineering section of Baba Atomic Research Center, and Professor Satyan Subaya is a faculty at IIT Madras. And I was fortunate enough to interact with these two gentlemen, particularly with Dr. Balasubramaniam, with whom I've been still working different projects. And he has been kind enough to give me the opportunity to write a book along with him, and it was published by CRC Press. So then, yeah, next one, please. Next 3 slides, Rishabh, are the list of publications that we did at CSIO during my tenure, and you can go faster now. And yeah, at CSIO, and after I superannuated from CSIO, also I got opportunity to publish maybe some 20-30 odd papers in the last 5 years. So a big thank you to all of you for giving me this Sunday evening to me and sparing your time, attention. And I hope you enjoyed the talk. I did very much. Thank you so much. God bless you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for very informative talk. Yeah, so sir, we have some questions in the chat box window. So we have 3.
Okay.
So we'll take them one by one. Okay.
Ma'am,
So sir,
can I ask?
question is from
Anupama, ma'am,
please.
can I ask?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Before we start, can I say one thing? Please identify yourself with your name and your area of work so that I can answer adequately. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Hello,
Aryan,
sir.
you can go ahead.
Yeah. Hello. Hello. Yeah.
Yes, Manjunath, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Please go.
Hello, sir.
Yep.
Hello, sir. Good evening, sir. I'm working in Diamond. Yeah.
Okay.
Sir.
I'm
Hear
not
me?
able to listen to you.
Actually, my
diamond turning. Then you continue again.
one of
Sorry, you are.
yes.
You are breaking
Sir,
your
actually, in
voice.
one of your slides, it was showed that.
Okay. What was that? No, disconnected. No. It's great. What was that?
In one of your slides, you were showed about the.
Sir. About the. Sorry, I couldn't.
38. Slide number 38.
Okay.
38.
Okay.
38.
Okay,
Actually,
let me see what is
have
that.
increase in the lower coefficient of friction. A lower coefficient of friction. I have a doubt of lower coefficient of friction. Yeah.
In 38. Okay. 38 corresponds to the fabrication we are talking.
Regarding the coefficient.
This is about the tool we are talking here.
Actually, the doubt is it's generally. I just want to. Yeah, yes. Actually, low. Yes, then we
Your voice is breaking. I'm
will
sorry, your voice is breaking. You can talk a little slow.
okay.
Manjunath, write in the chat
Voice
box.
is breaking.
Write in the chat box.
That would be better. I can
Am
come back
I
to
audible
you.
now? I mean, internet
Now
might be the
audible.
problem.
Please, maybe.
Okay,
Please
sir, no
speak
issues.
slowly. Yeah.
Okay.
38
So,
slide.
am I
What is
audible
it?
now?
Yes, you are
Okay.
audible. Go ahead.
Actually, the thing is, if you increase the, say, if you increase the friction, what about the uncut chip radius? Whether it will gonna decrease or whether it will increase?
Parameters also, because you
Hello,
know
sir.
what is the spindle speed. It depends on the other parameters also. What is the spindle speed and how your coolant is being placed.
Okay. Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah.
No,
If it is
I'm just
coming in
asking if the
between, then
friction
you are.
increases. I mean, okay. So the doubt is when the friction coefficient increases, when the friction coefficient
Okay.
increases,
Of
in
friction
one of the
coefficient of
literature, it was showed that it will friction coefficient when the chip when the heat takeaway where the chip is reduced. Mean the more heat is taken by the tool itself. I mean to say,
tool actually
if the
takes around 7%.
outward carrying chip is
The tool also carries
yes,
some
yes,
heat, but
the
how
stagnation angle
effectively
will
that is being
increase.
yes, how effectively it has been thrown out of the workpiece. That is important here.
Yes. Actually, I have doubt that whether it will decrease the uncut chip thickness or whether it will increase the uncut chip thickness because of increasing of the friction.
Friction, I don't know much about friction, but depends on your feed rate. Depend on the feed rate is small or high. That is you have to delve in. Because I have not done any study on the friction.
Small feed rate.
Yeah. Small feed rate means then your chip is also dimensions are very less.
Okay.
Right? Because I did not do any work on
As
friction,
the
so I cannot.
cutting radius is less. I mean. Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
That's the
Thank you,
point.
sir.
So I can't claim something which I did not.
Okay.
Next.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. Anyway, good question. Let me, if time permits, I'll go through this at leisure, please.
Yes, I will take two quick questions.
Okay, sir.
So from the
Yeah, please.
So the question is from Neni from CSIO. She wanted to ask how can we fabricate lens of different power? What are the parameters we need to focus on?
If it is a spherical surface we are talking, simply you have to play with the radius of curvature. Just the power is decided by just three factors: radius of curvature, both radii of curvature, and the thickness, which contributes little, and the refractive index of the material. This would decide. If you remember your simple equation in class 6, we studied K, that is power of lens, equal to n minus 1, which is where n is the refractive index, by n into C1 minus C2. C corresponds to the curvature of the lens. C1, there are two radii, two surfaces of a lens. So C1 is equal to 1 by R1. C1 minus C2 into D C1 C2 by n minus 1 by n, where D corresponds to the thickness of the lens. So the refractive index, both the radii of curvature and the thickness, these three will correspond to your power. You can play with that.
Okay, thank you, sir. So going to our next question from Abhiram Anand. He's asking how do you tailor the non-linear optical effects in aspheric surface materials?
This is a difficult question because non-isometric nature of surface would cause non-thermal issues. Also, the packing densities will be different. This is a study which is really very, very tough. There is no way except you have to bring some modeling into this play. And unless you have the structure, some idea of the structure of the material, I think a lot of work needs to be done in this. It's not so easy to give a simple answer because the material plays a major role. The uniformity of the material or the non-linear characteristics of the material play a major role in the surface characteristics. And I'm afraid, I think this kind of work was not attempted earlier so far. If somebody is willing to work in this area, I'll be very happy to see the outcome. It will be a great contribution to the community. We didn't get an opportunity to work in that area.
Okay, sir. So going to our next question from Niranjan. How can we measure thin film's thickness using simple optics?
Well, thin film thickness, again, the thickness is what is the quantum of the thickness? Are we talking of few nanometers, or we are talking a little higher than that? Coatings generally go, some 30, 40, maximum 90 nanometers. So if you can have any mechanism by which, a reflective mechanism that can be used. Otherwise, you have to physical way of doing this the thickness measurement that we attempted at CSIO to a good degree of success, particularly with the nanotechnology group of CSIO. They used to give us some samples, and similarly for coating people also. But I think we are going to damage that by using a physical means. There should be a non-contact methodology. Maybe interferometric methods will work here.
Okay, sir. So one last question from the chat box window. Which measurement process is best to measure a spheric lens? Profilometry or interferometry?
Very good. Both have its own advantages and disadvantages. Profilometer touches the surface, which may damage at times. Also, that is one thing. Secondly, it is a linear method. It's a scanning method. It draws a line over the surface, and the number of scans, if you go for more number of scans, the surface is damaged. But if you go for less number of scans, you are getting an idea rather than a complete or a comprehensive picture of the surface. So, to a large extent, around 95-96% of all aspheric surfaces nowadays are being characterized by contact profilometry. But a better way is go for interferometry. But with the interferometry, you have to go for a null character. What is a null character is you have to create a replica of the surface which you are going to measure in a complementary conjugate of the aspheric surface. If you can do that without errors in doing so, then I think that's the best way. The idea is how does interferometer works? You have to have a test surface and you have to create a interferogram. So if you can manage to do that, that's the best method. There are methods, there are some degrees of IRD has an equipment which actually does this. They have modified interferometer where zone wise they are doing it. That depends on the accuracy levels that you need. Both are serving the purpose. For all practical purposes, scanning the contact profilometry is meeting the requirements at this moment.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So there is one general question from the audience. They wanted to know, like, what are the career opportunities in industry after MSc Photonics degree? Yeah. So could you throw some light on this?
Very, very difficult and a very necessary question. Because optics, what is that you are studying in your MSc degree is most important. You are studying some non-linear things. I have no idea. I mean, what are being now taught, I don't know idea. But I'm a man of simple optics. I mean, when I say optics, for me, lenses and mirrors are optics. Okay, for me, the lens design is most sought of. If somebody is willing to work in the area of lens design, there is practically no lens designer in the country today. Do you know this? Very few, hardly 3-4 people are there. So, and there is a big demand also. That is one area. And if you are good at fabrication, fabrication is not taught in the country anywhere. Unfortunately, nobody, either IIT Delhi, Calcutta University, nor Cochin University of Science and Technology, there is no workshop course being taught where a lens can be made. When I was at CSIO, I think we had a course. I think now Dr. Shravan Kumar is teaching that. I don't know who is teaching. Maybe you can talk to Dr. Vinod Karar. Lens fabrication is also very important. If somebody has a good grasp of fabrication, and third one is characterization or metrology, there's ample market is there. I mean, in the industry. But, other subjects of optics, I have no idea because I stopped reading. Yeah, coating, of course. Thin film coating is yes. I mean, my MTech is completed 1980. So 40 years back, I did my MTech, and I still say that the real optical business opportunities are in these areas: thin film coatings, design, optical system design, fabrication, characterization. Rest of the subjects, of course, laser also is there. Rest I have no idea. I apologize on that lack of knowledge in those other areas. Maybe Dr. Gufran, who was once my colleague at CSA or currently with the IIT Delhi, he can be of some. He can have some latest knowledge on career opportunities. He should be. Apart from research, what else? That is my question. Research anyway, you can do this and can join some R&D lab. That's okay. Space ISRO is offering wonderful opportunities for a student of optics. ISRO and DAE is offering. CSIR is also offering. Apart from these three, DRDO, I forgot it, DRDO. These four are only two organizations, ICMR and ICAR, they don't need optics. Right? Rest four R&D organizations in the country, they need optics. But in the industry, whether MSc has a good demand or not, that depends on their knowledge and their intelligence. And most importantly, practical knowledge. You come and solve a Maxwell equation, I don't need it. See, I'll ask a simple question when somebody comes to me as an industry man, I'll ask a simple question. Boss, can you make a lens? If you can't make a lens, what good you are for me? So this is the difference between what we read and what we study and what is needed in the market. You need to look at that. I hope I confused people, but this is necessary. You need to know what is desired in the market rather than what is in your textbook. You can see the same thing is happening in engineering subjects also. Are you job ready? The question one has to ask. Are you not job ready? Then what is the good of your education? This is true for anybody and everybody. Okay. There is a big market. Optics is growing in the country, but if you are not good at your practicals, you are not needed. See, don't expect the industry to train you for 1 more year or 2 more years. Doesn't happen. Industry doesn't have, if you remember one of my slides, I mentioned that time is something. Give you a simple logic. In CSA, when we used to take projects, the minimum smaller, the project period was always a question on which we used to fight with our funding agents as well as with CSA management. 18 months, 2 years was the normal period for a project. You know how many days I get in an industry for a project? 20 days. From the data that I receive, the order that I receive and the deliver, hardly 20 days I have at my disposal. Within these 20 days, I have to design, I have to fabricate, I have to change the design, I have to test it, coat it, thin film coating, and prepare a comprehensive development report and submit it. On 21st day is my deadline. So I have no business to increase this. If I go beyond that, I have to pay a penalty. LD clause shuru ho jayega. 0.1%, I mean 1% per week I lose. Because friends, we have to earn our money, our salaries in industry. Whereas government organizations, government gives you the salary.